Everybody good? All right, second to last lecture day. Let's do it. Transport ops. All right, guys, today we're going to be talking about what makes up an ambulance. There's different types of ambulances. A lot of important things to keep in mind while driving the ambulances. I know it's not part of your clinical requirements or expectations to drive the ambulance, but especially when we start talking about the defensive driving stuff, things to look out for. I'm gonna get on a soapbox about driving safely and not like a maniac. Okay, so we'll get there. Obviously, guys, ambulance is used for transporting patients who need emergency care to the hospital. Is everybody clear on that definition? Okay. So all of these, specific numbers and the specific types of ambulances. Obviously, we don't really need that to be relevant to our ability to provide patient care, but registry likes to know that you know these things. All right, so make sure that you are memorizing and knowing the 1917 standard for automotive ambulances, that type of jazz.
Really, I guess we need to know the different MPA.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff in the operations portion of registry, they like to know, especially going back to the communications, like a trunking system, a repeater, duplex versus simplex, radios. They like to know that you know that. So keep that in mind. Ambulances are different than a standard SUV, true or false?
True.
True. What makes an ambulance different than just a regular car?
That's bigger.
Back's a lot bigger. Why?
That's a big box. You stick a bunch of stuff in.
Okay, we gotta have room for the patient, gotta have room for the stretcher, gotta have room for supplies, gotta have room for everyone else to sit. Okay, so the back's significantly bigger. There's a driver's compartment. Everybody cool with that?
Yeah.
All right. So again, guys, in the back, technically, safe, you can transport. Where do they go? How can they go?
3 on the bench seat, 2 stretchers and 1 whole side seat.
So,
2 stretchers. 4.
okay, so it is 6. I'm not losing my mind. All right, so we can have 1 patient on the stretcher. We can technically have, if they're sitting upright, 3 patients on the bench seat. 1 patient can be sitting in the captain seat, and then where's the other patient go?
It's right next to the stretcher.
Up front.
Oh, there's another seat across from the stretcher.
How is it second crew member?
On the bench seat.
Yeah.
Off the bench side.
It's like all the radio stones in the middle. It's not even like.
No, like
One more right here.
on both the trucks that I was on the captain, if you're in the captain seat to the left, there was a bench seat. To the right, there was a little 1 seat right next to the stretcher. It wouldn't have been comfortable to sit because the stretcher's cranked up right on it.
Okay, that's typically where we put the cardiac monitor.
Yeah.
Because we literally will buckle the cardiac monitor in over there, because if your partner takes a hard left turn or a hard right turn, if that monitor falls on the patient. Yeah, I don't know if you could feasibly fit maybe a pediatric patient there.
I mean, it has seatbelts. You could try and trap a person
Okay,
in
so
there.
possibly 7, but yeah,
All adult.
put somebody up front with your partner, right? Because if your partner's driving, you're in the back doing patient care, there's an empty seat up front.
You got 5 people in the back. Good luck doing it.
Hard a bus crash.
Oh my god.
It was all, what do you think the complaints were?
Like,
My neck hurts. Yeah, so I had everybody, I was just holding on to the oh crap handle up here. Just passing the computer around, be like, hey, sign here, sign
But
here.
you
sign
know,
here.
that was totally safe for you if you were involved in an incident.
Designed for maximum safety and comfort?
No.
No.
Maybe safety. I don't know about comfort though.
So guys, there are 3 different types of ambulances. We have a mixed variety at Grady. We typically have the type 1s, and we are moving towards the type 2s, the Sprinter vans that you see. They look like literally like the Amazon delivery vans now, like the very slender, skinny vans. We have a lot of those, and then we have a lot of just the regular, looks like a truck, half of the ambulance in the big box in the back. Okay, so no different types.
was transferred to a ambulance.
Yeah, guys, the Sprinter, I think it's Mercedes is the brand. But the Sprinters are obviously cheaper. So that's why we have some of those versus the big box.
Aren't those like way harder to work in?
They are not designed for comfort, no.
No, that's not.
Like if Chris had to be on a Sprinter all day. Guys, the front, you can't really hardly push the seats back in the front. So you're literally like crammed in there like this. There's not a lot of room for patient care,
Fantastic.
but they're more efficient in cost and gas. So, what is this? Star of Life, all right. If it is officially mandated as an emergency vehicle, it has to be decorated, if you will. The Star of Life has to be fixated on this vehicle in any capacity to say, hey, this is actually an emergency transport vehicle. Fun fact, you can also, sometimes you might see on the back of ambulances a license plate. It also says ambulance/hearse. They can be used as hearses as well. So here again are the different types. So this is type 1, type 2, type 3, but just different flow, different setup, different structure, but still the same capacity on all of them. All right, we're gonna talk about the different phases of an ambulance call. All right, if you guys have been out there doing some truck shifts, you've probably seen these in action. I've been talking about these, especially like the dispatch and the en route to the call, a good bit throughout the course, but we're gonna actually look at exactly what goes into each phase of the call here. All right, prep phase, what's involved in this?
Do you have everything you need to handle whatever body you get?
Guys, checking off your truck. I cannot stress enough how important this is. Why do you think this is a really vital part of your start of your shift?
Get somewhere and not have something.
Yeah, because do we know exactly what kind of calls we're going to be running?
Well,
If I'm missing some 12 lead cables, am I going to say, oh, it's okay, I'm not going to get a cardiac patient today?
no.
No, all right?
No, you're STEMI.
Right. Or I have a syncopal episode and I need to do a 12 lead to rule out that it's cardiac, right? I have a dizziness, I need to rule out that it's a STEMI. So you have got to make sure that you are checking off every single piece of equipment on your truck, all right? Especially the vital pieces of equipment, all right? What do you think some of those are?
Stretcher.
Suction, yep, wearing that one. Suction, stretcher, definitely.
Cardiac monitor.
Cardiac monitor, all things involved with a cardiac monitor, your AED pads. Make sure you got your 12 lead cables. Make sure you've got electrodes.
Your oxygen.
Okay, definitely make sure your oxygen is full. What else? What else can we absolutely not
Make sure the
improvise?
ambulance works.
Make sure your truck works, right? Make sure you're full on gas. Okay, so yeah, we want to make sure we've got blood pressure cuff, glucometer, all that stuff. OB kit, okay. Your drug box. Check your drugs. Make sure they're not expired because sometimes that gets past logistics. We get expired drugs in the boxes. Your airway management stuff, right? A BVM, OPA, MPA, all that jazz. Guys, there's a lot of stuff like splinting, things like that we can kind of improvise with. But those vital absolutely cannot do patient care without it. Make sure that they are on your truck and that they're working and that you know where they are, right? You need to be familiar with your truck because if you got a critical patient, it's a chaotic scene and your paramedic partner says, hey, grab me, X supplies. You don't want to waste 3 minutes fumbling through all of the compartments in your ambulance trying to find it, okay? So whatever service you get on with, just make sure you're familiar. At Grady, we have a system where we have sealed plastic bins in the back of the truck and they have different numbers on them. And those
There's no,
Huh?
there's no 3, there's no 9.
3 and 9, yeah. But each numbered bin has the same content in it throughout. I was anal retentive about that. I would get on the truck and I would make sure I put all of the bins in numerical order. Some people just kind of like throw them up there because I want to be able to say, if I'm talking to fire, who might not work for Grady and they might not be familiar with where all of our stuff is, hey, look in bin number 2 and get me X, All right, so that way it's like, it's in order and he's not like having to, look all around for bin number 2. So,
It's always off in this weird spot by itself.
huh?
On both trucks I was on, 10 was off by itself and some other compartments, but away from all the rest of them.
Because we don't have enough space to put it in with others.
Do we get like a piece of paper that says everything we need to check off, or are we literally
No.
supposed to know everything?
We just get
That
used to
is
it.
fine.
Dum. Guys, make sure that the stuff that you need in a hurry, like especially your tourniquets, know exactly where they are and have them somewhere that's easily accessible, right? If you bring your own personal tourniquet to work, if you keep it on your belt, make sure it's on your belt. Know exactly where it is in your jump bag because that's a very time-sensitive piece of equipment. So you need to know exactly where it is and you don't need to be jumping through all these hoops to try to get it out of your jump bag, okay? So this is an example. This is part of what we have at Grady. We've got most of them can close with like a sliding clear plastic door to make sure things aren't flying off the shelves onto patients if your partner sucks at driving. Might be labeled this way, might be in the individual bins like Grady, but just make sure we're at whatever service you get on, you're very aware of the location of your supplies. And that these doors are closed. You don't want a bin falling on top of a patient's knee that's already injured.
My truck was missing the door.
Yeah, did they have the Grady tape?
No, it was just, the one door was halfway closed.
Oh, yeah. If they're missing doors completely, we'll just get the Grady tape and we'll make like jail bars, so they don't come out.
Ours was like out of the things and it was just raining and it would like flop back and forth.
Yeah. All right. Make sure your stretcher works. It's kind of important, right? Make sure that the locking mechanism to keep it from fishtailing in the back of the truck is working, because that would be bad if we had a patient that was back there and just flying all around, because what are we worried about if that happens?
You getting injured.
So I'm worried about my patient, obviously, right? But are they going to be secured onto the stretcher with seatbelts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
What am I worried about?
so,
Worried about my ankle bones, right? Worried about my shins, and worried about my knees. All right, so just make sure that that's working as well. Be familiar with what all is in your jump bag, okay? There are certain pieces of equipment that solely stay in the jump bag that is just easily accessible. There are the same equipment that are in the bins are also in the jump bag just for easy access. Okay, typically in the jump bag, we'll keep airway supplies like a BBM. We keep an OB kit. We keep trauma dressings. We keep the blood pressure cuff, the glucometer, pulse ox, all of that stuff in the jump bag for easy access. We can just grab that and go. Yeah, trauma dressings.
Yeah.
So ACE wraps,
Tourniquets.
all that stuff. Check the inside of your truck, but also check the outside of your truck. Those of you who've done truck shifts, what have you noticed is on the outside?
Backboards.
Backboards, seat collars, head blocks,
Stair.
scoop stretcher, stair chair, all that stuff. So make sure you're not just checking the inside, but you're checking the outside.
I was curious, do all the, did they not put like, oxygen cylinders outside of all the trucks?
No, one of the ones I was on had one, the other one didn't.
Typically the only thing, because we don't really utilize that anyway, we have the 4
Yeah, the small.
smaller portable O2 tanks. Guys, you'll pick up a flow typically if you're on a truck with a paramedic. The EMT or even the AEMT is going to be responsible for checking off the majority of the truck, right? You guys are going to be responsible for making a jump bag, making sure the jump bag is good. All the bins are full. You have plenty of gloves. The oxygen tank's working. The outside of the truck is checked off. Because what do you think, especially that paramedic is going to be focused on checking off? Drug bag. Because there's a lot of drugs that we have, especially the controlled substances. We want to make sure that that seal is locked, so there's no discrepancy as to when we return it back to logistics. Okay, well this was open, there are drugs missing type thing. Make sure they're not expired. Make sure we've got the appropriate IV drip sets. We're checking off the IV box. I would take it on my responsibility to check off my cardiac monitor, right? Making sure all of the stuff with the cardiac monitor's there. We're checking off our airway roll is what we call it. It's literally like a little zipped up pouch and it rolls out. It's got all the supplies I need to intubate somebody. So that's typically what the paramedic takes over the duties of checking off. It's a little more time consuming. So everything else usually falls on the EMT or the AEMT. So just keep that in mind. Again, guys, you're gonna have to check the cleanliness of your truck too. It's not a prideful thing that I have to tell you about this, but there are some crews who leave the trucks a wreck. Not just their trash from their snacks or their coffee cups or whatever it might be. Sometimes it's dangerous to you. Sometimes there's blood all over the stretcher that the crews don't wipe off. Sometimes there's needles laying out that the crews don't dispose of. All right, so just make sure you're doing just a head to toe thorough check on the status of your truck before you go into service, because any discrepancies on that truck need to be taken care of and brought to light by you guys before you go in service, because after you go in service,
Your problem now.
it's your problem and it's your fault, right? So just make sure that you're making sure everything is in check for y'all to have a safe, productive, efficient day providing patient care. Secure your O2 tanks. That's a big one. They're very heavy when they're full. So if they are not properly secured in their spots, again, if your partner sucks or hits a curb and it comes out of its position, it can harm you or your patient. So make sure those are secured as well. Any questions about prep phase? Pretty good, pretty straightforward. Also too, make sure your technology is working, right? Check your tough pads, your tough book that you get assigned, that, you know, the dispatch cab system comes through, it gives you the directions, the thing that you're gonna be charting on all day. Make sure that you've got a charger for those things, that the batteries are good, that they turn on, that the Wi-Fi is connecting, the Bluetooth is connecting. That's a pretty big problem that most services have, but make sure your technology is good to go. So you're not, you know, out and have to come back to headquarters. You have to swap trucks in the middle of a shift. We take care of it before you go into service. All right, what's happening in the dispatch phase? You get a call dropped on your truck, right? What did you guys hear when the call came through?
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah.
That's in the back of the truck. I didn't hear a damn thing.
Incident
They said, hey, you
assigned.
got a call.
So typically, there's different tones for different software programs, but for the one we use at Grady, it'll say incident assigned. And then it'll pop up on your screen, hey, we're dropping a call on you. Initially, there's not a ton of information because, guys, it's like in real time. As dispatch is getting this information and plugging it into their computer, it's popping up on your end. Okay, so usually by the time they drop the call on us, we have at least a dispatch code, so we know kind of what we're going to. Sometimes it might change. The more questions they're asking, the address pops up. So you get a lot of information from this dispatch phase, right? What are we getting through that CAD system?
Yeah.
What kind of information are we getting from dispatch?
How many patients hopefully?
Okay, so approximately, hopefully, a right head count of how many patients we have. Where am I going? We get the address, right? Or maybe like an approximate, maybe an intersection of these streets, an approximate location. What else?
What's wrong with the patient?
What's wrong? We get a triage code. What else? So hopefully we get some accurate information about scene safety, guys, especially if it comes through as like an assault or a GSW or stabbing or anything, you know, a domestic issue, anything that could be potentially violent. They catch on to that. In a sans COVID world, typically APD co-responds. They're automatically dispatched on these calls. Not sure of the status with that now, because as we discussed the other day, they are no longer responding to MVCs that don't involve injuries. APD's not.
When
So,
I did my clinical on Saturday, we pulled up on the scene before car MVC. The people on scene did not call 911 because they thought police just weren't going to respond, because there was like one patient, she had like an abrasion on her arm. That was it. But our medic called APD and said that because she called them, they would dispatch. That's what my preceptor stuff.
I got dispatched to 3X, to 3 NBCs over my 2 shifts. AP showed up to 2 of them. Fire showed up to 1.
Okay. So yeah, guys, everything I'm gonna lecture on is in an ideal world. I know everything's not ideal right now, so it might be a little different when you're getting out there doing your truck shifts. But this is typically how things should go.
Are
And
they
then
not responding because of COVID, or is it because of protests?
Yeah,
I think A, they're short-staffed, and B, unnecessary exposures.
I saw maybe at every assault and fire at every, just like,
Fire was at a lot of things for me as well. Like,
Good.
on my second shift, they were there before us on a handful of them. They've been there like half an hour.
they were helpful.
What else are we getting? What other information are we getting? Okay, guys, we get a lot of information. We have that EMD system here, right? What does that stand for?
Emergency medical dispatch.
Emergency medical dispatcher. So we get our dispatchers who are certified with this training. They're asking, hey, what color is the patient? As in, are they blue? Are they purple? We're asking if there's any signs of like cyanosis or anything like that. Can you look at their chest? Do you see their chest rising? They give instructions to do CPR. They'll let us know in that dispatch if CPR is in progress. So we get a lot of information from dispatch. What starts happening in this phase?
We're talking about what you're doing.
So you start planning, guys, you're seeing size up starts here.
Yeah.
Right? Number of patients, MOI, NOI, where am I gonna find my patient? How can I access my patient? Is my scene safe? Right? It might even give you an indication on BSI. If you get that, hey, there's a lot of blood on scene, we're always gonna have our gloves on, right? But hey, maybe double glove, maybe put our safety goggles on, those types of things. Okay, so this is a very, very helpful phase of your call. All right, what do we need to keep in mind though?
It's not perfect information. It might be
Okay,
wrong.
it's not perfect information all of the time, but why is that?
Dispatchers, they can only get the information that they're getting from the person on scene.
Yeah, guys, dispatch is the information that they're giving you is coming from the mouths of whoever's calling 911. Vast majority of the time, these people who are calling 911 have no medical knowledge, right? So they might not know what they're looking for. They might base every answer they give dispatch off of Grey's Anatomy or House or, Chicago Med or whatever. So it's really important to understand that you can get inaccurate information, but most of the time, guys, it's not on the dispatch's end being at fault. They're only giving you what people are verbatim telling them over the phone. All right. So what's leading into another thing we need to keep in mind about dispatch phase? Yeah. Guys, get on scene and don't get tunnel vision. If it comes out as chest pain, it could, your patient could say, oh yeah, I hurt my ankle. My chest isn't hurting. I just knew if I said that, you guys would get here faster.
Yeah, we got one that was
Really?
dispatched as a diabetic something or other, and we got there and the guy was like, no, I have chest pain.
So don't get that tunnel vision. You can start having your wheels turn about, okay, if it is chest pain, it could be this, it could be this. Let's make sure we get a 12 lead. Let's make sure we look at this type thing. But confirm your information that dispatch gave you when you get on scene. Confirm that the chief complaint is actually the chief complaint. Confirm that the patient is actually your patient, right? Don't get tunnel vision. Don't get upset with dispatch if you get there and it's something completely different. But just make sure we're confirming what we got from dispatch to be true when we come on scene, because that's going to vastly determine our route for patient assessment and patient care.
I was gonna say, we get this stuff. We had my first ambulance with at least 2 calls up. The first one we got dispatched to a heart attack. It was not a heart attack and it was something cardiac. And so that was fun. And the second one we got dispatched to a stroke and it was not a stroke or anything stroke related either. So yeah.
Yeah, because guys, I just said it, but there are a good bit of our Grady patients who will, say these certain trigger words when they call 911. Difficulty breathing is one. Chest pain is one, right? If they say those 2 things, it doesn't matter what their other complaints are. It's automatically a high priority dispatch, which means we're going to be going code 1.
The stroke one actually, when the dispatch initially came through, so we initially almost got dispatched to a patient crying. That was the only chief complaint. And then it got put on hold because patient updated to a stroke about 10 minutes later, we got dispatched.
So you will get on scene for toe pain. It'll get dispatched as chest pain and be like, yeah, no, I just said that so you guys will get here faster.
Yeah.
So just know that that is a thing. It does happen. All right, en route to the scene, guys. This is going to be what we talk about in the latter part of this chapter, or I think, yeah, next chapter, this chapter, can't remember, one of these two. Guys, what is a big problem with this part of this phase of your call?
Driving fast and
Atlanta traffic.
Okay, so a couple things, right? Traffic sucks in Atlanta, especially if it's around what? Rush hour. Guys, when is rush hour in Atlanta? Morning?
4 to 7.
The entire day.
The entire day, right? Morning rush hour usually starts around 4:30 and doesn't really end till like 10. All right. Afternoon rush hour starts at like 3 and doesn't end until like 8. All right. So you need to anticipate some traffic issues there. Once you guys get familiar with the city and driving and all of this stuff, there's a lot of times that we will prefer to take surface streets to go to a call or to get to the hospital over the highway because
I was
there's
not
going to
going
be,
anywhere.
Huh?
I was not going anywhere.
Yeah. So it's a lot of the time surface streets are a lot easier and a lot quicker because we don't have the backup that we see on the highway. So that'll be something that just comes with getting familiar with your territory. What else?
the wrecks.
Yeah, guys,
Driving fast.
did y'all notice anything when y'all were driving code 1, either to the call or to a hospital?
Lots of leaning on the horn.
Okay, so
Sirens on.
we have lights and sirens on, right? What are we telling people? Hey, I'm here. Do I have your permission to go around you? Do I have your permission to, if we're, because technically we do have some right of way, but there are in certain circumstances that we'll talk about later, we don't have the right of way. We're asking permission. All right. Most of the time, guys, when you're driving, some of you guys, it might be true to y'all, but if you're driving down the road or the highway and you start to hear a siren, what do you immediately do? Start like looking around, like what's going on, right? It never fails. What are you supposed to do? To what direction? You're supposed to yield to the right. All right, you should have been taught that when you were getting your license. That's a big, with emergency vehicles, if they're coming up behind you, you're supposed to yield to the right because emergency vehicles are supposed to keep to the left. But what do a lot of people do?
We go whichever
They just-
direction.
yeah.
They just spaz out, right? A lot of people, guys, just wherever they are, they just slam on their brakes and they just stop in the middle of the road.
Or they just don't freaking stop.
Or they don't acknowledge that we're behind us or that we're behind them. They either don't hear us, don't see us, or they don't care. Right? There are so many people who will just be like, driving and lights and sirens are on. There's different types of sounds we can make with the sirens to kind of change up the tone so people can hear you. Lay on the horn, the actual horn, and they'll just be like, hey, and they'll just keep driving. Right? So anticipate people to act stupid when you're driving lights and sirens. This is a very, very dangerous part of our job is driving lights and sirens because people don't always know how to react. All right. And do you think that we have a very quick response time if we have to slam on the brakes with that big old truck? No. And we also get what?
Tailgaters.
So we also get tailgaters sometimes. But what do you get?
Anxious.
Anxious. All right.
You get heavy.
I get a little pissed
So
off.
it depends, right? If these are the first couple of times you're driving lights and sirens to a call and that dispatch comes up, it's cardiac arrest or chest pain, you're like, it's a heart attack, we gotta get there quick, all right? And you got that adrenaline rush going, we get what's called siren syndrome. What does that mean?
Tunnel vision, essentially.
Yeah, that's what.
So we get that tunnel vision, we get that adrenaline rush, and it makes us do what? Drive recklessly. Guys, this is a major part of the job that I get on a soapbox about because it is not going to do you, your partner, or your patient any good to drive like a bat out of you-know-where when you're going to a call or going to the hospital. This is the most dangerous part of our job during operations, is driving to and from calls with lights and sirens because people don't know how to react and we get that siren syndrome. We drive way too fast. You're not paying attention if it's a stop sign. You're not paying attention if it's a red light. And if it is a red light, you're doing what? With that siren syndrome. Just going right through it. That's how people literally get killed. All right, so I'll get on my soapbox later, but just be aware there are certain laws and regulations that we absolutely have to abide by. And we'll get to that safety part, but this is a very dangerous part of our job because of other people's reactions and you get way too excited about getting to that call. What do you always need to be in an ambulance, especially if you're in the front? Technically, if you're in the back,
Strapped in.
buckled in. Wear your freaking seatbelt. Okay. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Arrival at the scene. What's happening here? What's continuing to happen here? Scene size up, right? What are some things I'm thinking about? What are some things I'm looking at? Scene safety, absolutely, first and foremost.
Number of patients.
Okay, so how many patients do I actually have? What's the overall environment or atmosphere of my call, right? Do I maybe need to get APD here for some crowd control? Do I need to get animal control here because there's a dog that's like ferociously barking at me and I can't get in the house? Do I need hazmat? Do I need fire? Because sometimes guys think the people who call in, they won't think to tell dispatch about these certain scene hazards for us. So again, we need to confirm that none of these things are happening on scene and get our additional resources en route if we need them. Okay, what else?
Where is the patient?
Where's my patient? What does that mean? What am I thinking about with that?
Well, they asked you whether you were told there.
All right, so two specific things I'm thinking about here. Access to my patient, we'll dive a little deeper into that, and access and egress. Yes, ma'am.
We were called to a gunshot and our patient was out walking her dog.
And did not get shot?
She got shot. They think it was shrapnel or something. It went through her house. She was like a secondary victim. She was walking her dog. She didn't want to go to the hospital.
Well, he's gotta go before she goes to the hospital.
Just got shot and kept on going.
So guys, access. What am I thinking about here? How am I going to get to my patient? What all goes into that? What equipment do I need to take?
You, your partner, if, on one of our calls, we have people who wanted to help us get up there. Even not everybody can fit in.
Yeah, so bystanders, witnesses, are they going to help or hinder
Can
my
the stretcher
access
come
and
with
egress?
you?
Huh?
Can the stretcher even come with you?
Right, guys, can I even get the stretcher to where my patient is?
Most of the
A
time, the
lot
answer
of
is no, it feels like.
a lot of Atlanta has very older homes. And way back when, it was all, if you guys watch HGTV, right, if they renovate like an old home, they're very boxy, they're very small, they have very tight corners for hallways. A lot of times we can't literally get the stretcher
Lots of stairs.
down the hall to that patient, all right? So it might be that we go up to the front door, we drop that stretcher there, and then we bring the patient out to the stretcher some way, somehow. All right, so we're thinking about that. Do I need the stair chair? All right, a lot of that is what equipment do I bring with us? Okay, so per Grady standards, and every other service is gonna be different. If your patient is more than 100 feet, I think that's the right measurement, from the ambulance, even if they're critical or not critical, you bring your stretcher, you bring your jump bag, you bring your cardiac monitor, you bring all of your equipment. Mhm. Now,
It's a long time. to
sometimes through repetition, you know, if you can get a visual on your patient type thing, we might just say, hey, come on, come walk with us to the ambulance. Might get the patient, no, walk with me. All right, but guys, especially if you're going up to, you know, even like one flight of stairs, if you're in an apartment building or a high rise in Atlanta and you're going up to like the 10th floor, what do you need to bring? Everything. Even if it's a toe pain call. Because what if it gets drastically misdispatched and it's a cardiac arrest and you're just bebopping into that call with your jump bag and that's all you have?
It'll take a long time to go back and get your other
It's
stuff.
gonna take a very long time to go get everything you need, right? And typically your partner is gonna help you carry all of that stuff up. So that's gonna be all on you, just you, getting a stretcher, a backboard, suction, monitor, drug bag, airway roll, O2. It's a lot of stuff for one person to handle and it's gonna take a lot of time and you are going to look incompetent AF, right? You would rather be over prepared than have to waste time for a critical patient, for somebody that needs this equipment to go back to your truck and then come back to your patient. All right, so that's another thing, not getting tunnel vision. Oh, it's just toe pain, it's fine. We're just going up 3 flights of stairs. I'll just bring the jump bag and I can help them walk down the stairs. And your patient's, cyanotic or in cardiac arrest or having a heart attack, okay? Another thing with access, we want to think about what kind of patients don't we want to be walking, and we want to have them on the stretcher if at all possible. Okay, so if we have any kind of altered mental status, do I want that patient who's coming in out of consciousness to be like, hey buddy, just put your arm around me, we'll walk to the truck?
No.
Who else?
Geriatrics.
So geriatrics to a certain extent, yeah, absolutely. Who else?
Probably chest pain.
Yeah, chest pain patients, right? So respiratory distress patients. Anybody that has like an orthopedic injury to the lower extremities. We really don't want those patients walking. Sometimes it is just impossible. We have to do we have to carry the patient to the stretcher. But if they're, pale, cool, clammy, if they're looking like they legit have something going on, we don't want them walking it if at all possible. Why?
Don't want to make the condition worse.
Yeah, that physical movement could exacerbate their condition. All right, so keep that in mind for getting your patients access. MCI, guys, we're going to talk about that. That goes into your patient counts. If we're needing to triage, if we're needing more resources, if you're needing to establish the role of the incident commander. But we'll get into that tomorrow. We're going to dive deep into triage and MCIs. Okay. So safe parking. This is really kind of going into access and also egress. All right. So access, guys, be very mindful. If it's a steep incline, you might bottom your truck out trying to get up that steep incline. If it is any type of like gravel, you might have some issues getting stuck, mud, ice, anything like that. You need to think about, if I drive up there, if I can physically get there, can I actually get out? All right, so if the patient's driveway has a very drastic, sharp turn, you're not gonna make that in those big box trucks, okay? So safe parking is really important to understand. On a crash scene, we'll talk about that, but you're parking at least 100 feet, depending on if you're first on scene or second on scene, in front of or behind the crash. All right, we'll get to that later. Hazmat, we talked about this. What's the safest way to park? Uphill and upwind. If we have a known chemical or a known exposure to anything, we want gravity and the wind directions to be our friend, right? We don't want gravity to bring that liquid down to us. We don't want the wind to blow that chemical towards us. All right, if it's a known chemical exposure, what is a safe distance to park?
100 feet.
I want to talk to you guys about this. That's where the term rule of thumb came from. You need to park far enough away, uphill and upwind from this known chemical exposure scene. You need to be able to stick your hand out, close one eye, and cover the scene with your thumb. If you can't, you're too close. All right, so keep that in mind. Guys, always, 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 even if it's a code 3 response, even if you're going non-emergency to a call, if you're parking in the street because you can't have access to a driveway or any closer to your patient, leave your lights on. Please turn your sirens off, right? We don't need to sit there and have them blaring and say, hey, we're on scene, but we're not in the truck, we're doing patient care, and we're just really gonna annoy you guys the whole time we're here. Keep your lights on. Why?
So people can see the giant
So
box
people can
ambulance.
see the giant box ambulance that's sitting stationary and they don't run into the back of it. You would be shocked at how many people do that. So if you're parked on the street, because technically, guys, we're an emergency vehicle, we can do that. We can break some rules. All right, but your lights need to be on and throw your flashers on too. Because it's also a liability thing, right? If you're sitting parked in the street, you don't have your lights on, you don't have your flashers on, and it's just sitting there, technically somebody could have a leg to stand on and be like, well, I didn't know if they were stopped or what they were doing, and they were just like sitting in the road. So just make sure we're doing everything possible to make it known that you're there so people don't hit you. What am I thinking about for egress? What does that mean?
So you can use that.
Leaving the scene. So access is getting on the scene, getting to the patient. Egress is leaving the scene. What are some things I'm thinking about for egress? All right, so guys, make sure, I don't care what situation it is, I don't care what your scene is, take an extra 60 seconds to back up into your scene. All right, so when you park, your butt end always needs to be towards the direction that you need to be going. Couple reasons. Why?
Scene suddenly becomes not so safe anymore.
What if your scene safety becomes compromised and you need to get the F out of Dodge? You and your partner need to be able to run out to the truck, get in the front compartment, put it in drive and hit the gas and get out of there. Right? If you just pull into, like, head into a scene and you're immediately having to run out there because scene safety is compromised, you're going to have to put it in reverse. Make sure you don't hit anything on the way back. You might have to do some turns. You don't want to do like a 10-point Austin power turn to get off of your scene if you need to do so in a hurry. So always back into your scene for scene safety and also what? Patient access. Where do we put the patient in the back of the truck? Or how do we get the patient in the truck? Through the back of the truck, right? So it's a lot easier to have those doors right there. Let's get the patient in instead of having to walk around the truck to get to the back. So always, always, always back up into your scene.
Also, if I'm teching that call and my partner's doing some 11-point origami
And you're
turn,
doing this, trying to get a blood pressure or 12 lead.
I'm not happy with that partner.
Why are the trucks so tall? Seeing as a 5'4" person who has to pull herself up at the truck.
Speaking as a 6'2" person.
How could he stand up if it wasn't?
I still have neck pain.
Like
I mean, from the ground to the.
suspension, all of the mechanics that go into having to transport a load that heavy and to have the hydraulics and all that stuff. It can't be like a low rider type thing. But yeah, you have to hold like the rope handle right there to pull yourself up.
Rope handle? Or they didn't
It's like a rope net. Like if you're coming in the door where the wheel well is, that little net on the side.
Yeah.
So is that where you're supposed to go?
It's just an option.
I mean, we I was surprised when you said about bringing the stretcher, we didn't do much of that.
Yeah, we didn't either.
They basically said, hey, you wanna walk? And they're like, oh.
Well, it
I thought it was a little
depends.
sketchy, but then the one thing that most concerned me was when you bringing up, I mean, here I am got with a 75, 80-year-old person, now they're trying to get up into that ambulance. That is,
Yeah, if once I get a visual on my patient, I'm gonna confirm, yeah, let's grab a stretcher, let's see if we can get them to walk. A lot of that might be like the terrain, if we can like, if it's muddy or something like that, a stretcher's not gonna go through that,
some of
or
those folks are pretty frail.
presentation. It's the medic's
No, I
judgment
get that.
call,
No, I get it. Also,
and
it's-
sometimes it's okay not to have your stretcher, but most of the time you need to have it on standby for sure.
Yeah, we got that happen out here a couple times because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also too, guys, for egress, if you're going in a house and you're walking down all these hallways or you're going in a big building, what do we need to keep in mind?
Don't be lost on the way out.
Remember the way you got there, or look for exits. Okay, so again, if we get a patient who goes south really quickly, or your scene safety goes south really quickly, you're not like a rat running through a maze trying to get out of the building to your truck. Guys, your truck is your safe haven.
Or, even if it's not like some dangerous, you just don't want to like spend 5 minutes lost in wherever you are.
Yeah. All right, so this is talking about if we come on scene to an MVC. All right, typically, who do we have responding with us to a scene of an MVC? Typically fire and PD, all right, depending on where it is. Let's say it's on 75, who else should be responding?
Highway patrol?
Huh?
Highway patrol? Oh, that's easy, yes.
The
State farm trucks.
Hero trucks, right, guys, heroes, they have a very dangerous, unappreciated job. All right, these are the trucks that you might see if somebody runs out of gas on the side of the road, they'll go help them out. If they have to change a tire, they'll go help them out. They're really big, really heavy trucks. They typically go there like for safety, okay? So why does fire particularly, if they're on scene first, they're gonna park where? Up front?
Behind the scene.
Okay,
They're
so
protecting.
this is kind of, everybody always struggles with this because in front of or behind gets kind of like lost in translation. All right, so let's say this is 75 north, right? This is, the traffic's going this way. Okay, here's the crash. If you are the first person to arrive on scene, fire's not there, hero's not there, PD's not there, where do we need to park? Because what are we going to be serving as on top of patient care? We're gonna be serving as what? Traffic control. Okay, so where do you think we need to park if we're first on scene?
Upstream.
Upstream? Here. So if the traffic's going this way, the car's going this way, the accident's in this lane, we need to park behind the crash. Why?
Have a big bright blocky thing in front of it so somebody.
Guys, every single one of y'all is guilty of doing it. I'm guilty of doing it. What do you get when you see flashy police lights or ambulance lights or fire lights?
Something look very interesting.
You get the rubberneckers, right? People are driving, oh, what's going on there? That's why we have a lot of traffic backups, especially on the highway, and we also have a lot of secondary accidents, right? People start slowing down because they're like, oh, what's going on? They're being nosy.
I swear I do it more now that I'm in EMS. I'm like, ooh, what's happening?
But then also we have that slowing of traffic, and then what happens? If you're looking this way, you know, you might start steering off to that way. You're not looking, you might not see somebody slam on the brakes in front of you. We have a lot of secondary accidents. Again, is an ambulance bigger and heavier and shinier and flashier than a sedan or an SUV?
Yes.
Yes. So we want to park at least 100 feet behind the accident to make sure if somebody, we have a rubbernecker and, you know, we have a secondary accident, that if they hit that ambulance, it's going to be a lot, you know, bigger. It's going to be a better buffer than them hitting the car that was involved in the accident. That's if you're first on scene, you need to serve as traffic control. All right. Notice how they're parked. What's going on here? Okay, so we're parked at an angle, right? We want to park this way because why?
Get back out.
Okay, so for egress, right? Also what?
The target to move the vehicle when it's sideways.
Okay,
Traffic around.
right? We want to make sure our e-brake is on, okay? But also too, guys, this is mainly for egress. If you are parked, let's say there's like, you're parking towards the median or towards traffic, where do we want to have our tires angled?
So if you get hit, you don't go towards the car.
Okay, so probably away from the scene of the accident, right? Because what else gonna be happening over here at the scene of the accident?
People are trying to doing things.
Okay, there's gonna be people walking around. Patients, EMS, fire, police, hero, all right? But if you are parked next to a median, we can turn the tires towards the median, because I'd rather go, if I got hit from behind, I'd rather be pushed towards the median than out into oncoming traffic. It just depends on if you have a barrier next to you, okay? So if not, point your tires away from the scene of the accident. If you have a barrier, point it towards the barrier, because that's gonna cause less injuries and less issues than if you go out into traffic and cause more accidents, okay? Now, what if we come on scene and fire is already there? They're serving as traffic control. They've got this blocked. We don't need to do that job. Then we park 100 feet ahead of the accident. Traffic control is already established. Guys, you're there for what? Patient care. All right, we're not gonna be there to hang out and, you know, help fire clean up the scene or look at all the other cool stuff or the, you know, the inner workings of an MPC. We're gonna get there, we're gonna get our patient, we're gonna load them up, and we're gonna do what?
Take them somewhere else.
We're gonna leave. Okay, so we need to make sure we're parking in front of the scene so our egress is a lot safer. Okay. Also, if you're serving as traffic control, what do you need to try to do?
Transfer traffic control to somebody else.
Huh?
Transfer traffic control to somebody else if there's people still on scene.
Yeah, if I showed up on scene and I served as traffic control, I was there first, I parked here. Once fire comes on scene, where are they gonna park?
Well, you-
Behind me. Right, so that way when I leave, traffic control is still there. All right, so parking in front of the scene, we're trying not to get blocked in. by other emergency vehicles. Guys, if you can, take up 2 lanes, right? Take up the lane that the accident is in and then have a safety net of taking up that other lane. Especially on 75, these 4 lanes of traffic, we're gonna take up 2 lanes. Why?
So that you have a lane to get into on the way out.
It'll save a little work.
Yeah, so you've got space to move and you've got space to do patient care, get them loaded up into the stretcher. Because guys, if I'm just working in this one lane that the accident is in and I have the ability to take over a second lane, if I'm leaning over to get my patient out of the car, get on the stretcher, my butt's literally out in traffic, like oncoming traffic. Okay, so just make sure that if at all possible, you block that secondary lane so we have a safety zone to move around and to work in. What's a scene safety thing we need to think about here? There's a bunch of them, but what are we thinking about? People going around the accident. Okay, so let's start with yourself. What do you need to have on?
High vis
Best.
Your high vis vest. And also too, guys, if it comes out as like a rollover or an injection, what are you thinking? Yeah, it's gonna be a really good trauma call, right? When you park, do not, for the love of Pete, just throw your door open and jump out. I gotta get there quick, I gotta help him, I gotta save him. You take that time, you're looking your mirrors, you're checking your mirrors to make sure there is no traffic, there are no hazards for you. You open the door and you get out as safely as possible, all right? We are not worried about, losing 10, 20 seconds getting to that scene versus you getting plowed by a car because you were not looking and you opened the door when somebody was coming. All right, so just keep that in mind. Talked about that. Talked about that. Again, guys, keep your lights on, throw your flashers on. So we are doing everything within our power to say, hey, bystanders, big, shiny, heavy truck here. Please don't hit me. Please use your, your cautionary skills here. Transfer phase. Any questions on arrival on scene, parking, all that stuff?
Can I leave my sirens on so that everyone knows that I'm the party truck?
No, you cannot. We used to have PA systems, like speakers, and trucks would like Grady tape the button and like leave it up against the radio and stuff. But we don't have that anymore.
They took that out.
We need to take those away.
I should not be trusted.
We had too much fun with those. What am I thinking about for the transfer phase?
Do I need to render care while we're en route?
How am I getting my patient to the truck? Safely and effectively, right? Stair chair, stretcher, do I need to scoop stretcher? Do I need to manually carry this patient out? What's gonna be the safest, most efficient way of getting my patient from the scene to the truck? Okay. Transport phase, what's happening here? You're driving to the hospital. What's happening here? Patient care, definitely patient care. What else?
You're driving the big heavy ambulance again.
You're driving a big heavy ambulance again. You're calling in report. Please don't forget to call report into the hospital, especially if it's a critical patient. If it's a toe pain, all right, typically Grady does not want you to tie up those radio waves for something that does not need additional resources. If it's just a stomach pain and we think the patient's got food poisoning, I'm not gonna pull that report in. If it's cardiac arrest, call in it. STEMI, altered mental status, unconscious, I'm managing my patient's airway, stroke, anything like that, the patient's gonna need additional immediate resources, call in your report.
Yeah, because when they call it in, everybody at the hospital has,
Yes.
like, they get ready.
Yes. And things might permanently change, but we have something called the RCC, the Regional Coordinating Center, up and running. It happened when we had the massive flood at Grady, when we had to kind of shut down several areas of the hospital. But whatever the call is, whatever the patient complaint is, you call the RCC and they give you permission. Yes, you can come here. No, you need to go somewhere else. So that might be a changing aspect for you guys to keep in mind.
So what do you do if the hospital doesn't answer when you report in?
Try multiple times.
Yeah, we did. Emory ignored us 3 times in one of our calls.
That's right. When you get on with a service, you'll get phone numbers to the different ERs. So we always want to try the radio first because the radio is what? It's recorded. So that way, if there's a discrepancy, that paramedic dispatcher says, no, you did not call a STEMI alert. That's why we didn't have the team ready. They can literally go back and play that tape and see exactly what was or was not said. So for insurance purposes, we wanted to try to do the radio. If they're not answering the radio, we can try calling on the phone. If they're not answering, you need to have several attempts recorded, like, hey, I tried to call 3 times type thing. They can technically pull the tapes. Even if they're not responding, they can hear you calling in. But yeah, just hope that they do, especially if it's like a cardiac arrest or something. That would be bad.
Yeah, a lot of our medical calls, we call them on the phone and they're like, hey, can you bring this person?
Yeah. So that's the RCC. But yeah, you don't want to be that crew who rolls into a hospital with a critical patient or doing compressions and be like, oh, snap, we forgot to call you guys. We were only 5 minutes away. Sorry. You don't want to be that crew. That's a bad day. When you start with a job, guys, you're going to go over the radio or over the system, and you have to let dispatch know, hey, we're leaving the scene. This is a hospital we're going to. Here's our starting miles, blah, 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 blah. You don't have to do that as a student, but when you get hired on as an employee, you have to keep track of that stuff and let dispatch know, hey, we're still on scene, we're transporting, hey, we arrived at the hospital, type thing. Another one with this is also safety, all right? There's different policies at different services, but at Grady, the only reason you are transporting a patient back to the hospital going lights and sirens is if they are hemodynamically unstable. If you have got a patient who you are just, your paramedic partner can't do anything to maintain a blood pressure, the airway is just declining, your patient is hemodynamically unstable, we go back to hospital code 1. All right.
So we can go code 1 to the scene, but it's less likely we'll go back.
It's unlikely that you'll be transporting back to the hospital code 1 if the crews are abiding by the actual protocol.
Yeah. We only went code 1 for one back to hospital once, and that was on a cardiac arrest.
Even if it's like a stroke or something?
Technically, we're not supposed to go code 1 cardiac arrest.
Really?
Because do they have any vitals at all?
We did get Ross.
So if you get Ross,
You had
yeah.
that one.
If you get Ross, we're gonna go code 1. But if you're just working asystole the whole time, technically that doesn't fall under protocol, but people do it all the time. All right, remember your Q5, Q15, please make sure you're calling report. And guys, another safety issue here. Okay, guys, there's been several studies done. Going lights and sirens only gives us like a 90-second or a 2-minute advantage when it comes to time. Now, different considerations, if it's just gridlock, rush hour traffic, that's a little bit different. But on a regular day, standard traffic flow, we don't get that much advantage time-wise, driving lights and sirens, because we're having to account for other people's poor reactions to lights and sirens. We are still having to stop at a stop sign and stop at a red light before we proceed through that intersection, okay? It's just very, very dangerous. I know it seems like a really cool part of the job to drive lights and sirens. You're gonna get annoyed by it, right? You're gonna be like, oh, God, I gotta hear these lights. I gotta hear these sirens again. Huh?
It's very bumpy driving down the shoulder.
And B, guys, it's a major scene safety issue, okay? So,
You don't want to do the next viral video of an ambulance getting T-boned by something?
We
and it being your fault.
We went lights and sirens to our first call on my shift on Saturday. It was a 14-year-old fell off his bike. I was kind of curious why we went lights and sirens, especially when we got there, because he was fine. He was in great shape. He walked on the ambulance.
There was a trigger word that was said
Yeah.
by the caller, probably involving like a head injury.
That he did have. So
Well, then, yeah, that was probably
Okay.
warranted. Guys, you're multitasking in the back of the truck, right? If you're doing any type of interventions, you're having to mentally say, okay, I gave nitro at X amount of time. Okay, I need to get another 12 lead. I need to send it to the hospital. You're constantly managing your patient's ABCs, your interventions, your vitals, all that stuff. Be mindful that if you've got a critical patient, you're not charting until you are completely back in service from that call. So if you need to do the tape method out there in real life, go for it. But you're gonna have to be remembering these things mentally, remembering each vital sign, remembering each timestamp if you have a critical patient, because you're not gonna have time to sit there at the captain's chair and be like charting as you go. So keep that in mind. Delivery phase, what is this? Transferring that patient care. All right, why is this so important? That's where like 95% of abandonment cases happen, is at the hospital. Why? How does this happen?
All right, we're here. Good luck.
Yep, cool, you're good. You just got a toe injury, just walk out to the waiting room, they'll see you in 12 hours. Right? What do we have to get? What do we have to ensure? We need that signature, right? But guys, we also are a patient advocate. So what do we need to ensure is happening?
Sure, getting out of care.
You're giving a thorough, accurate patient report to whatever nurse, to whatever medic, to whatever doctor is taking over this patient care. We don't want something to get lost in translation and the patient suffer from it, right? We don't want the hospital to give them a medication that the patient's allergic to because we forgot to tell them that they were allergic to it. So make sure you are giving a thorough patient report to be a patient advocate, guys, especially if we feel like this is a case of neglect, right? Or a case of abuse, something like that, we're mandated reporters. So you would have to include that in your verbal, not written, your verbal report. Hey, you might want to get social worker involved in this. You might want to get a caseworker on this call. Hey, you need to get APD involved, all that stuff. Okay.
So, I have a quick little question. How often do you have patients that once they get to the hospital, like, actually, no, I don't want to do this anymore? Because as we were bringing one guy into Grady, as we were walking in, there was another guy who was walking out of the ambulance bay who said, quote, I'm gonna go get my drink on.
Because there are some patients who use you as cab service, as a taxi service. They'll just refuse when they get to the hospital and say, nope, I'm good, and just walk out because they needed a ride downtown. So it happens. Not like all the time, but it happens. Or they might just get pissed off at Grady's procedures. I had a woman, one time I picked her up, I forget, she was trauma, but it was a minor injury. We get to the hospital, guys, everyone goes through security, right? They check your patient's belongings. If there's a visitor with the patient, they go through the metal detector. They search all of their belongings. And this woman in her purse had 2 bottles of liquor. And security was like, this can't come in the hospital. Like, we have to keep it here and, get rid of it. And she got pissed. She's like, no, I spent my money on that. You are not taking it. She just picked up her purse. She goes, I'm out of here. So you might get some of those cases.
Does anybody use a recorder? Some sort of recorder and just kind of speak out loud and capture that data? I mean, I'm just trying to, it was on the back of the
That would
truck.
be a HIPAA violation.
Was doing stuff, right? They're moving around, their ability, to write stuff down at the same time they're doing stuff.
Technically, you can't because it's a HIPAA violation.
Even if
So,
you never reference the patient, you just, 10 o'clock, blah, 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 put this in, did this, yada, yada.
if you did that, you would have to get consent from every patient. Hey, I'm recording this interaction. Are you okay with me recording it? Because if you don't get their consent and somehow it gets lost or something happens, it's a lawsuit. Even if you're not saying, hey, I know you are Jane Louise Doe, and we picked you up from here, even if there's not blatant patient information, it's if they don't have their verbal or written consent, it's a violation.
If the patient does walk out of the ER, you can document that. Just patient.
Hey, sir, really, really quick before you walk off, can you sign right here saying that we didn't take you, you didn't want to go to the hospital? Try to get her a signature, just document it up the heck out of it.
I'm pretty sure I saw a medic in Piedmont like chasing after a dude with the AMA form.
I don't chase after patients. You would, refusal signature, unable to obtain refusal signature due to uncooperative patient upon arrival to Grady Hospital. Patient stated blank, patient walked away, patient refused to sign. You just got to document it.
So different question for you. Say when we roll in, the people who are receiving the patient are being not cool.
Mhm.
When do you have a teachable moment with that person?
It depends. This is going to be a case by case thing. There's a couple of notable nurses in triage at Grady. But yeah, if it's cause for concern because the patient's not being taken care of type thing,
Yeah.
then you're going to be stern.
I don't know,
Stern.
I had a moment with, it was a young fella at Piedmont, and I thought he was being not just obnoxious, but very, rough with this older man patient.
Oh, you're a patient advocate. You absolutely need to speak up for your patient. You can do it tactfully and professionally, and if the other patient care provider is not receptive to it,
So you can
Like,
start
hey,
there,
man.
get a little progressive.
who's charging us today?
Okay.
Where can I find them?
Okay, cool.
Type thing. Because guys, I told you there's been a couple times where I bring a patient in who is hypoglycemic. We gave meds, their sugar went back down, and their sugar was like 50 something, and they were altered. Like, yeah, I can go out to weight room. And I'm like, sorry, did you catch that sugar? Did you catch the GCS? Like, I think we need to find somewhere else besides the waiting room for this patient. So you don't have to be a jerk about it, but
Well, I don't want.
I know, but if they're continuously not listening or not doing something to provide for the patient, then you need to start getting a little more firm and be like, hey, this is not okay, and hey, you need to remedy this, or let me talk to charge nurse.
Something that frequently doesn't, like, I haven't done this in healthcare, but something you can frequently get is like, write down exactly what they say verbatim and say, hey, can I get your signature on this so that for the record of what that you think this is okay?
Yeah, guys,
Given
if you
circumstances?
hint to any type of, hey, let me speak to your supervisor, or hey, let me just confirm you're neglecting this part of the patient report, or any not, hey, I'm gonna sue you, but any indication that there could be some repercussions from what they're doing or not doing for the patient, their ears are gonna perk up and they're gonna do what they're supposed to do. But
The system is there with all kinds of accountability. Use that in your favor if you need to.
yeah. All right, so with this delivery phase, guys, as you're wrapping up, okay, with Grady, we arrive at the hospital, we transfer patient care, and then we start to do what in the ambulance bay?
Clean it up, please.
Clean up and restock, right? If there was any blood or bodily fluids, or we need to decon every single time, right? But we might take a little bit more time if we had any of those bodily fluids, wipe down all the equipment, wipe down the stretcher, change out the sheets. If we used any supplies out of the junk bag, get them from the bins and restock those items. All right. If you have a critical call or a cardiac arrest call, it can take a while to restock. We got to get a new BVM. We got to make sure we're still good on drugs. We got to replace all the AED pads. We got to do a lot of stuff to restock these critical patients after these critical patients. All right. So we start doing this here, and typically, guys, we don't go back into service until our truck is restocked and cleaned and ready to catch a call right out the gate.
It took us like 45 minutes to get back in service after the code worked.
Because a lot of times too, if the patient's critical, it takes a while to get them into the hospital, get the patient transferred over. The crew in the hospital works that arrest or that critical patient for a little bit, because their first priority is not gonna be like, okay, yeah, let me sign real quick for you.
No, it's okay. We need to deal with this patient. who's
Let's
trying
do
to get
this. And then you kind of hang out there and you can catch up on your charting. And then when there's kind of a lull and the chaos, you can be like, hey, real quick, can I get a signature? And it takes a while to clean and restock. So
Kind of a random question about the jump bag. So for instance, I prefer my blood pressure cuffs, the ones that are on the truck. Are we allowed to put that in the jump bag if there's empty space or something like that?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay, I didn't know how particular.
but you
they
got to
got
make
about it.
sure it doesn't get stolen. It doesn't get ruined by bodily fluids or anything like that. You're just taking a risk of breaking or losing it. But yeah, you can use your own equipment.
I didn't know how particular they got about putting your crap in their crap.
Kind of as a follow-up question to that, if you have your own tourniquet that you keep on yourself and you end up using it and you restock off of one of Grady's,
No,
Yeah. I think
that's
you're
called
not, but-
stealing.
Grady
No.
doesn't know Walker.
Oh, no, nope, 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 nope.
Yeah, I figured
You're
that.
being recorded. So this is a little bit different from Grady because do we have stations at Grady? No. What did you guys do in between calls?
Parking lot is out of the road.
Yes, sat at a post. You didn't go back to a house. You didn't go back to a station. There are still several EMS services who have stations. Particularly those are gonna be the ones who work 24-hour shifts. You gotta have somewhere to sleep. You gotta have somewhere to try to eat. You gotta have bathrooms like this. You gotta have these things if you're working 24-hour shifts. So either en route to the post or en route to the station. Again, we're cleaning and restocking, a little different for Grady because we work off of a post system versus a station system. We typically take care of this before we go back into service from the hospital. Okay, because you guys might have seen it. You're at the ambulance bay, you get cleaned and restocked. Hey, dispatch shows 614 back in service. Okay, I'm clear 614, copy a call. Or, okay, I'm clear 614, head down to Cleveland 75 for post. So you could get one right out of the gate, you gotta be ready. Post-run phase, this is gonna be where we finish our chart. All right, some patients, guys, if it's just a typical toe pain call, vitals are stable, there's no like significant interventions that we're doing, you can have that chart finished by the time you get to Grady. Right? Hey, sir, sign here. Hey, nurse, sign here, and that chart's good to go. But if you've got a critical patient or a very involved patient or multiple patients, you're typically going to be finishing those charts after you go back in service, going to another call or going to another post. So this is where you're wrapping up your documentation. Make sure that everything in the truck is still good, it's still running well. We're, again, still making sure everything's cleaned, disinfected. Guys, we talked about this. Change the sheet out every single patient, even if they weren't dirty. If they sit on that stretcher, if they sit on that sheet, change it out for the next one. You should be cleaning this equipment thoroughly to the point where you would be comfortable having it used on yourself after that last patient contact. Okay, so make sure everything that comes in contact with your patient, you're wiping down, you're cleaning. What all is that involved? Okay, your blood pressure cuff, your pulse ox, your stethoscope is a big one that a lot of people forget. What else? The stretcher, the handles of the stretcher, anywhere your patient might, if your patient got in the truck themselves, the bar that they grabbed to get into the truck. All right, if you did a 12 lead, if you put them on a monitor, those 12 lead cables rest on their chest, wipe those down. Anything that the patient came in contact with, clean it for the next one.
So our truck, they didn't have any like wipes, they just had a spray. So they just.
Yeah, does the same job. If you don't have wipes or spray, the recommended cleaning solution is 1 part bleach to 100 parts water. You need to know that if you want to clean your house too. It's great. I use a little more bleach. Weird. I like the smell of bleach.
Where do they?
Makes it feel clean.
Where's the bleach on the truck?
At Walmart.
Is it?
And then registry likes to know that you know that solution as well. 1 part bleach, 100 parts water. Questions on all of the phases of the call? So guys, when you get to the hospital, the delivery phase, who can you give a report to? Someone at your level of scope or higher. Me as a medic, if I came on scene, I could not legally, I mean, technically I could do it, but there would be legal liability if I walked in and Trey just got his EMT license, he's working somehow in Grady's ER as an EMT, and be like, hey Trey, you wanna take a patient report? Here you
Absolutely
go,
not.
sign here. That's against the practices on my end. Your scope or higher. You can give a report to an AEMT, a medic, a nurse, a PA, an NP, an RN, an MD.
So if you're a medic, what inside the hospital counts as your scope or higher?
Paramedic, nurse, NP, PA, doctor. Huh?
For like a C,
They're below,
no, that's what I'm saying, acceptable.
pretty much.
Pretty much all of them.
All right, defensive driving, guys. This is, I know you're doing the Tims, but if you ever get the chance to go to like an actual sit down, one day's lecture, the second day's driving, I very highly recommend it. If you have not driven, period, we've hired a couple people who have never driven. They didn't even have their license. If you've never driven a larger vehicle or a wide vehicle, you are in for a treat. All right. Guys, the patient care didn't scare me, didn't intimidate me at all when I first started at Grady. The driving scared the living pee out of me. All right. Atlanta streets are not meant for big cars. There are several streets that are extremely narrow. All right. I have no idea. My husband's an FAO for the fire department, which means he drives and like operates the engine on scenes and stuff. I don't know how he drives it. I don't know how AFD drives these ginormous engines on the streets of Atlanta.
Whoever
It's-
set the lands on ponds deserves to be slapped upside the head.
Who was it? Wasn't there somebody's grandfather in here that helped design, or great grandfather designed the structure of the highway systems in Atlanta? And I was talking mad trash. Who? Andy. And I'm like, sorry, but your great grandpa sucks.
Oh, yeah, and just
Hey,
other
it's
things like.
Yeah, he was trying to buy.
We just.
Well, I'm glad he told you and didn't tell me. So. But yeah, there's a lot of things that go into A, driving defensively, and B, driving defensively in a big butt ambulance. All right. So, I think you guys get put through, not EVOC. Oh, what's the other one? SEVO. I think you guys go through a defensive driving class as part of the new hire orientation here at Grady, which is great for you guys. Again, if you take SEVO or EVOC, you can also show that presentation, that certificate to your car insurance company. So make sure, guys, there's a lot going into safe driving. All right. What are some things that go into it? Just all around, driving a car, driving a truck, driving an ambulance.
See the other people know what they're doing.
Awareness, okay? Make sure we have situational awareness, and they really go into that in EVOC and SEVO. You're not just focusing on the road that is directly in front of you. You're constantly scanning ahead of you. You see X amount of yards ahead of you, that van that's about to back up and has, is going in reverse. And we need to just have the mindset of what?
They might not see.
Everyone else is oblivious and a terrible driver, which in a lot of parts is true, right? But you never need to rely on somebody else to say, oh, hey, I'm coming lights and sirens. I assume that you're going to see me, and I assume that you're going to yield to the right and you're going to stop. Assume that everyone is totally oblivious of you.
They are a blind, ancient, drunk dog.
Yes. All right. So you're scanning, hey, X amount of feet ahead, I see a soccer ball coming across the road. There might be a kid following that, and they might not look both ways before they cross the street. All right. So we're constantly scanning ahead of us while we're driving. And also, what are you checking?
Did you always have an out?
No, while we're driving, we're checking what? Your
Your
mirrors. Constantly check your mirrors. It's hard to do that. You only have really 2 mirrors in the ambulance because most of the time there's not a rear view mirror because what's behind you?
The box.
The couch, the box, right? So constantly check your side mirrors. All right. Understand that especially in an ambulance, you have blind spots.
You can't just look over your shoulder either.
No.
Oh, man.
There's a big wall.
Man. All right. General, overall, what are some things that go into safe driving? Wear your freaking seatbelt, guys, please. If you don't care about, injury and maiming yourself and death, if you are caught not wearing your seatbelt while driving at Grady and at most services, that's a fireable offense. Okay. Don't be stupid. What else?
Appropriate speed.
Appropriate speed. Okay, be mindful of the speed limit, the posted speed limit. Be mindful of the weather conditions, right? Might want to drive a little bit slower if it's snowing or like torrential tornado downpour, like it was Monday. FYI, there was an actual tornado that crossed over 75 at Howell Mill. We saw it from like the front porch up there. It was like 2:00 or 2:30, and it looked like it was like 10 p.m. It was super dark, and we like sat out there and we were watching it, and we were just like, oh my god, those clouds are spinning. Sure enough, we're like, oh
There's a crazy like micro burst of
yeah, came out of nowhere.
over like 1 year.
That place is freaking cursed. It's haunted. I will never swim in Lake Lanier.
All of like
Ever.
a bunch of docks were just broken and boats were floating everywhere.
Pretty sure lightning struck like right next door, because we heard like the pop, and you could feel it was like the ground was like buzzing. And we're like, we're gonna go find out. But yeah, guys, if it's raining very heavily, if it's snowing, if it's ice, anything like that, we probably want to drive a little bit slower. Okay. Fatigue is a big one. There was recently out close to where I live, a paramedic or EMT was working 2 or 3 jobs at 2 or 3 different services, because you guys are not getting into this for the money. You're not. All right. You might be lucky and can work as an EMT or an AMT at one job and have enough money to pay for your bills, but that's typically not the case, especially if you're supporting more than just yourself. So she was coming from another job. She had worked like a 12 or 24-hour shift, extremely tired. She was pregnant at the time, fell asleep at the wheel, killed somebody, and she got a jail sentence for vehicular homicide. Be very mindful of your fatigue level, especially if you're coming from another shift, all right? If you are to the point where you are like, I really don't need to drive right now, tell your partner, hey dude, I really need you to drive until I get some coffee or until I wake up, or if you're that bad, you need to go home, okay? Because if you're like, no, it's fine, I'll power through it, and you fall asleep at the wheel, these are really big, heavy trucks, all right? You can and will kill somebody. So just make sure your fatigue level is you're very conscious of that. Distractions, right? Make sure it's against the law in your personal car, but if you're caught texting or even holding your phone while you're driving a Grady vehicle, immediately terminated. Okay, guys, the biggest reasons you will get fired at Grady is going through our auto insurance. If you have a lot of vehicle contacts, which means you're either running into a sign or another car or a pole or anything involved with like the auto insurance that Grady has to pay for, you're gone. Like in a heartbeat. No questions asked. So just be mindful of that. Yeah. So guys, we talked about this. Nobody knows how to react properly when you're driving lights and sirens. If you are driving lights and sirens, guys, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. You don't have to drive 30 miles above the speed limit. As long as you are driving nice and smooth, you're not slamming on the brakes, right? You're making sure people are getting out of your way. I very much, 10 out of 10 times, would prefer a smooth, a little bit slower, but a nice and slow, smooth ride to the hospital driving lights and sirens than jerk, following over top of the patient, or it's just pure chaos.
It's hard enough managing the patient in a moving vehicle at all, let alone when
Yeah.
moving is.
Again, guys, don't anticipate people to see you, hear you, or care that you're there. All right? Because you're coming up behind somebody, don't be like, oh, it's okay, they're going to yield to the right and I'll just stay to the left. No. Anticipate them to slam on their brakes. Anticipate them to go off to the wrong direction. And before you go over to that right lane, you need to clear the traffic, all this stuff. Okay?
Drive like everybody else is absolutely.
Because they are.
Yeah.
Like inadvertently, they are.
That's how I was taught to drive, but it didn't make sense until I moved here, and it's like, oh yeah, they are.
And
They
guys,
are all out to kill you.
I get when I was in high school, my parents would always just worry if I was driving somewhere. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. I never speed, blah, blah, blah. She's like, I understand. I trust you. I don't trust anybody else. And that's especially true in an ambulance. Like, you can be confident in your ability and your safety driving, but especially if you've got those lights and sirens on, you don't trust anybody else because everybody else goes stupid when it either rains in Georgia or there's emergency vehicle behind them. They're just like, oh, what do I do? All right. Cushion of safety, guys, it's a big truck, it's a heavy truck, it can't stop on a dime. All right, so that rule, that 2 second, that 3 second rule that you keep in your own personal vehicle, you need to make it a 5-6 second rule with these trucks because we're heavy, right? Even if we slam on the brakes, that momentum of us going at a speed limit, it takes a significantly longer period of time for us to stop in a regular car. So keep that in mind. Try to avoid being tailgated from behind. You can't really control that. Please don't brake check anybody in the ambulance or in a company vehicle at all. Please don't do that. Be mindful you have blind spots. If you're driving two-way call, who do we need to utilize? Your partner, right? Your partner is going to be on your right side. Have them at these intersections. Your partner needs to be clearing the right side of the truck for you. So you're concerned about your side. You'll get to the point if you have a good partner and a long-term partner that you will trust them when they say clear right. All right. Some of them you just want to be like, just double checking, you know. You'll actually find yourself doing that, and you're like, if you're driving with a friend or somebody else, like at an intersection, like in my personal vehicle, you're clear right. Like, just do it. Don't get freaking road rage in an ambulance. I mean, all right, excessive speed. Don't drive ridiculously fast. We technically can drive faster than the posted speed limit. We technically can speed, and it's not against the law. But it needs to be reasonable. Okay? If you are driving in a residential neighborhood, posted speed limit is 25, and you're driving 50, not okay. If you're on the interstate and the posted speed limit is 65 and you're driving 75, okay. But be mindful of where you are, be mindful of what the speed limit is, and be mindful if you really even need to be driving that fast, right? Are we worried about traffic in a residential neighborhood? No, there's no reason to be driving that fast.
What's the legal limit for the law?
Oh, yeah.
What?
You have to go get somebody's check off.
Technically, there's not one. Technically, we like to try to stay within that 10-mile-an-hour limit. But it needs to be reasonable for your situation, your circumstances. Okay. Yeah, guys, if you're in the back providing patient care while someone's driving ridiculously fast and hitting potholes and being all herky-jerky, it is very hard to do effective patient care, especially if you're needing to start like an IV or, you know, get a 12 lead. It's just going to be very hard to do that. It's not safe for the patient. It's not safe for whoever's in the back of the vehicle because, guys, technically we're supposed to be what in the back of the truck? Seated and buckled in, right? Does that never happen? Okay, maybe once in a blue moon you can stay seated and you can work on your chart. But if you've got a critical patient, you can't just sit there in the captain's seat, put your seatbelts on and be like, sorry, sir, hope you can do compressions on yourself. I'm just going to be hanging out here until we get to the hospital. You're constantly moving, you're up, you're reaching over the patients to get the cardiac monitor. All right, so it's dangerous for the patient and yourself and your partner if you are driving excessively fast. Hinders reaction time. Again, guys, it's harder to do that defensive driving, scanning ahead of you, anticipating all of the stuff. If you've got that siren syndrome, you're not noticing the surroundings. You might have, you know, less time to react if you need to slam on the brakes type thing. So siren syndrome, we've already talked about this. Guys, be mindful of the height of the ambulance. It's a much higher clearance or lower clearance, depending on which way you look at it. You can't go through drive-throughs in an ambulance. If you go, yeah, you can't go through banks. You might show up at like an apartment complex or a nursing home complex and like the overhead awning you need to be very familiar with how tall the tallest part of your truck is, how tall that box is. Because we have had several crews who just do not either pay attention or have a very terrible gauge of measurement, and they scrape the top of the box because they go underneath an overhang that's way too short.
Most are 13 9 inches. Most of our
The big box ones, yeah.
13 foot 9 inches.
You're a lot wider, right? So these very skinny lanes of roads, it takes wide right turns. So be mindful if you're taking a right turn that you're not going to be jutting out in that lane of traffic that's sitting there at the stoplight. Try not to do a bunch of curb checks with your tires, but sometimes we just kind of got to do what we need to do. But you need to be mindful of the size and the weight of these trucks. At Grady, we have to have a spotter every single time you are backing up. Doesn't matter if you're patient loaded, doesn't matter if you're trying to get that proper parking spot on scene, you have to have a spotter. What does that mean? Oh, I'm clear. That's why I say technically at Grady. You have to have somebody, and per Grady standards, it has to be a Grady employee. When you're backing up, you're looking at your mirrors, but you also have someone out of the truck in your line of sight through your side mirror saying, hey, come on back. Hey, you got just a little bit. Okay, stop. You're too close. Or, hey, you need to go this way. Hey, you need to turn this way. You're supposed to have a spotter because that's where the vast majority of our vehicle contacts happen. Somebody backs up into something because they can't see all the way around the truck.
How does that work at a hospital where you're like, especially if your partner is still actively rendering care to the patient?
So a lot of times, guys, EMS is a team approach, right? If we're coming in lights and sirens to the hospital and I'm starting to back up, if I still have my lights on, I'll cut my sirens off. But if there's other crew members that can see, hey, they're doing compressions in the back of that truck, they'll probably hop over and be like, hey, dude, I got you, and jump in and be a spotter. We can utilize AFD, we can utilize APD, but if something happens, it's going to be your fault, not your spotter's fault, if it's not a Grady employee. So again, guys, we need to make sure when we're driving, we anticipate when we need to turn, right? We need to anticipate we're not going into a turn super fast. We want to kind of put the brakes on before we get into the curve of the turn. Be mindful of how wide the truck is to know when you need to start turning, how sharp you need to turn, all that jazz. Again, if it's raining, if it's snowing, if there's any weather conditions, if it's densely foggy, you need to slow your speed so you can have more reaction time. Make sure you're constantly scanning ahead of you, checking your mirrors, all that jazz. Did we already watch the Utilize Your Partner video? Didn't? Okay, so a couple videos.
Remind me, I have it on thumb drive. I give you
Oh, the ones that use your driver training?
yes.
Yeah.
I need
That would be good.
two things. I need to give you the ones from RIMSA.
Yeah.
And I need to give you the ones that Stephen input
For
out of all the.
those would be
I'll see your thing about that.
those would be better. So guys, most of these,
Oh, shit.
Oh, no.
Well, damn. Go ahead,
I don't think any of these are in the States, so you get to hear the different sounding sirens and different like language being spoken in the background. But you will notice the majority of these happen in intersections. Okay, we're gonna talk about some rules that we are not exempt from, and that's part of the reason a lot of these accidents happen.
do some of these look like the same company?
Yeah, they are look like this.
A bunch of these, I'm pretty sure a bunch of these are in India, so they might go over here. And Eastern Europe. 'Cause I think
Are you kidding?
I just watch. This is totally the driver of the ambulance. Little Ricky Martin playing in the background. My car's like, screw you, dude. I need to get over.
Yeah, is it being filmed for another ambulance?
I think it's a fire truck.
I think all of these that need to rush are.
Oh, my goodness.
She just keeps on talking.
Lucky Luke.
Did that truck just turn into the ambulance?
Ooh.
No spotter. Whoops.
No way.
I don't want on the phone. I don't want on the phone.
Stop.
Oh, my goodness.
So good.
Okay. So,
So many of those involve rollovers. I guess given like the.
so
weight
yeah,
of the
no, guys, we
Center drive.
ambulances are very, very top heavy. So if you get any type of, especially like going through an intersection, or if you try to overcompensate with the steering, it is very, very likely these ambulances are going to flip.
My very first, shift, I think it was a Fayette County ambulance, went into a ditch, hit a telephone pole, flipped over the patient, and the stretcher flipped over.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, the structures aren't gonna stay secure just in that one little
It-
wall and rollover, are they?
Yeah, they're pretty secure, that anchoring system on the bottom. If the ambulance, if the crash like jars it and it dislodges, then the stretcher is going to go flying. But typically they're pretty sturdy if they're locked in there
They'll
tight.
stay locked in a rollover, really?
Carl would like to be like,
Freaking Carl.
There you go.
Welcome, Carl. All right, so guys, this is utilizing your partner. Of course, this is going to be my comedic relief video, right? But make sure if your partner is upfront with you, you are relying on that partner to say, hey, clear right, hey, watch this car, hey, like utilize them when you're going to a call.
I'm Kelly Beezer. I'm a mom. I'm a professional photographer, and I use intakes. Go see straight.
Well, we're 0 for 6. Last chance at the Elmhurst Country Club. Other side of the lake on the southeast side. I don't get it. Really don't get it. How does it work? Do everything I had of that guy, nothing. That's how it goes sometimes, you know. You lose everything falls apart, and eventually you die and no one remembers you. That is a very good point.
Oh, right, turn.
Wait, no. It means bear right. Not there. It said right, so take a right. No, look. It means go up to the right, bear right, over the bridge, and hook up with 307.
Make a right.
It's a shortcut, right? It said go to the right. It can't mean that. There's a light there. He knows where it's going. The machine knows. No, it's up there. Here. Be calm. I didn't train for this. Okay. Make it the window. Here we go.
Make a U-turn. Get to my side.
Is she trying to get the president?
Sure you're okay? Fine. Did you get the rental insurance? Because that is pretty important too at a time like this.
Okay.
Makes you wonder how many times it's shot.
I know. It only been once. I've ruined a car. Okay, so guys, really important to understand these next few slides. We are an emergency vehicle. We are exempt to some rules, to some laws. If and only if we're responding to or we're on scene of an actual emergency call. All right, so what are some things that we can do if we're on scene for a call or if we're going to a call? If we are actively going there and we have our lights and sirens on. That's gonna be the last one I talk about. What else? So we can go over the posted speed limit. Like we talked about earlier, it needs to be a reasonable amount for the environment that you're in, right? Don't go 50 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour residential neighborhood. That's not needed, that's not necessary. Don't be going 110 miles an hour on 75. That's way excessive. That's not necessary. All right, what else? Okay, so we can drive on the shoulder. If it's gridlock traffic and that shoulder's open and nope, that's my only way to go forward, we can drive on the shoulder of the interstate. What else?
We park on the road.
We can park on the road. What else? Where else can we park?
And no parking zone.
And no parking zones. Now, if it's a fire, like a structure fire, it's probably not wise to park in the fire lane, right? Because that's going to be by the hydrant type thing. But if it's a medical call, we can park in a no parking zone, such as a fire lane. What else can we do? If it's a one-way street, I can drive the wrong way down a one-way street.
Dangerous.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, that's one of it. I'm going to recap everything with a statement. What else? Driving the wrong side of the road, right? If it's a 2-lane road and it's, different lanes of traffic. I can technically go on the wrong side of the road. I can pass on a double yellow line. I can drive in the gorge. Is that what it is? Violating the gore, not the gorge. Like if you're going up to a turn lane at a red light and you can't get over until it's a designated lane, like the slashes. If you get over too early, that's technically illegal. Oh, you can't do that. You can get a ticket for that, for violating the gore. You can only get over in that lane and when it's a designated lane.
What's really bad is you get a fee for every single car you pass.
Alright, so I can do all of these things. I can go through an intersection, a stop sign. I can go through a red light intersection. I'm gonna come back to that. But guys, while doing these things, what is the ultimate end all be all approach I have when I'm doing these things? So scene safety, there's a particular phrase that it's called. It's called due regard. You are doing all of these things that we are technically exempt from if we are responding to an actual call, but you have to do them with due regard. What does that mean?
Need justification for it.
So we need justification for it, guys. We can't do these things if we're just trying to go get lunch somewhere.
You gotta consider everybody else's.
We can't do these things if we're trying to find a bathroom or if we're trying to get back to headquarters on time so we don't get off late. That's not acceptable. But the whole time I'm doing these things, going to an actual call, responding to an actual call, I'm keeping everyone around me, I'm keeping their safety in mind. I'm doing all of these things with extreme caution. I'm checking my blind spots. I'm utilizing my partner. I'm going at a very slow rate of speed, doing all these things. I'm keeping my lights and sirens on, right? When I park, I keep my lights on. All of this is done with due regard, making sure we're doing everything possible to keep everyone else's safety in mind, including myself and my partner, my patient, but everybody else. Okay? Because technically, people going down a one-way street, if they're going the correct way, who has the right of way? They do. Even if I have my lights and sirens on, they have the right of way, and I have to respect that. I have to anticipate it, and I can't like bully force them off the side of the road just because I want to go this way. That's not using due regard. Okay. Guys, let's go back to the intersections and the red lights. Big soapbox for me. Okay. When can we proceed through an intersection or a red light when we don't have the right of way?
After coming to a complete stop.
Got to have lights and sirens on, not just one or the other. If we're going to a call, we have both on. And I have to do what? You have to stop. You have to come to a complete stop and visually clear that intersection before you proceed through the intersection.
Whatever you want, I'll take over if you want to do what I have to do.
If you want to do next chapter, you can, but I'm going to need you tomorrow, remember?
Yeah. What's the next chapter? How long we got? And I'll go on around somewhere.
30-ish minutes.
No worries.
Guys, you cannot, if you notice, almost all of those dash cam videos were because a truck was just going straight through a red light. Didn't tap the brakes and just assumed, hey, my lights and sirens are on. People are going to hear me and people are going to actually care to stop even though they have a green light. You don't go through a stop sign. You don't go through a red light until after you have literally come to a complete stop. You look left, you look right, and you clear. You don't hear anybody, you don't see anybody, and you go through that intersection how? Slowly. You don't blow through that intersection, guys. That is such a neglectful, such a reckless thing to do. That's what that siren syndrome is, right? Oh, I got my lights on. I got my sirens on. People are going to hear me. They're going to understand that I'm going to an emergency, and they're actually going to stop even though they have a green light. Dangerous and reckless. Guys, we have had patients killed here at Grady because the crews just blew through a red light. Ambulance got T-boned. Patient didn't make it. Medic broke the back.
that piece of rice with potato, if the provider in the back was surviving instantly, like that.
Spinal fracture. All right. For the love of Pete, you can only proceed through an intersection or a red light after you come to a complete stop. You clear left, you clear right, and you creep through that intersection. Is everyone 110% clear on that? I needed a verbal yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do not blow through these intersections. That's how you get hurt and killed, your patient gets hurt / killed, and you kill other people. Okay? Because are we bigger than most cars on the road? It's not a fair fight, right? Okay, there are a couple of rules that we are not exempt from. It does not matter if I'm responding lights and sirens to the most important person. Keep your comments to yourself. Even if I'm responding to the President of the United States, code 1 call, lights and sirens. I don't care what the call is. I don't care who I'm responding to. I don't care what the circumstances of the call are at all. There's a couple things that I cannot get away with. What are those? Passing a stopped school bus. All right, now the school's back in session. Y'all know what I'm talking about. They will be either picking up kids or dropping kids off. If they are stopped, if they have the flashy red lights and have the bars out that say, hey, stop, kids are getting on or off this school bus, you cannot pass them.
Because the kids are not going to be watching.
Because the kids are not going to either be paying attention or they're going to be so distracted that they're just not looking at what they're doing. Okay? There is one exception to this rule. Anybody know the exception?
Like that way?
If there is an actual physical barrier between you and that school bus. So let's say, even if you're behind the school bus or if you're in front of the school bus passing lanes of traffic, you have to stop if they're picking up or dropping off kids. Now, if you're on a separated lane with, let's say, a concrete barrier or a physical barrier between the school bus and yourself, you can proceed with caution. What does that mean? Proceed with caution. What should you do?
Slow down.
Slow the F down. Very, very slowly and very, very cautiously. You are scanning that road ahead of you, the sides of you for kids. Okay. What else are we not exempt from? Has to deal with kids again.
Speed in a school zone.
You cannot speed in an active school zone. You guys have seen it. If you're driving and it's an active school zone, the lights will be flashing and say, hey, this is the speed limit when these lights are flashing and the school zone is active. Again, even if we're going lights and sirens to a code 1 call, you slow down, you can't go a mile above that posted speed limit in those active school zones. If you are going 10 miles above those posted speed limit for those active school zones, major, major fine. And Grady is going to fire you immediately because you're a liability to their insurance now. What else should we probably do through an active school zone or when these kids are getting dropped off and picked up by buses? Let's cut the lights and sirens off. Why? Could be scary, but it could be distracting. They could be drawn towards those lights and sirens, right? It could be, creating an environment for those kids to get injured, to get hit by the truck, to get hit by another car, because they're saying, oh, hey, that's cool. What's that? Walk out into the road.
Or just delay how long it takes them to
I'm
get out
sure
of
where
the
they're
way.
standing there and be like, come on, Timmy, get on the bus, right? So while we're going through those school zones, those active school zones, and we're waiting for that bus to pick or drop the kids off and pull in their red lights and pull in their stop signs, cut the lights and sirens off, and then once we get through that or past that, we turn them back on. Okay? Guys, there's a lot of different kind of just common courtesy things. Grady also has a policy. If you are at a red light or at an intersection and there's physically no way around the cars in front of you, there's not a turn lane open that you can kind of go around. There's not another opposite direction of traffic lane you can go around. There's not a shoulder. If there's physically no way you can get around these cars at a red light, we do what? We turn our lights and sirens off. And we wait until that light turns green. Why?
Because all you're doing is annoying everybody around you and you're not. going
So
anywhere.
we're annoying for sure, because they're really loud when you're right up against them. But what else?
If you make them move, they're gonna just push themselves in the wrong lane.
Yeah, remember guys, people don't know how to react most of the time when they have an emergency vehicle behind them. So if I'm 2 cars behind, if I'm, I've got 2 cars ahead of me at a red light and I'm sitting there just with my lights and sirens on, just staring, what are those cars gonna think that they need to do? They have to
Get out of the way.
Oh, I need to get out of their way. And they're gonna go where?
Into the intersection or wherever.
Out into the intersection. Okay, so I could cause that person to get T-boned, or I could cause that person to hit somebody coming across the crosswalk type thing. So we turn lights and sirens off. If there's no way around the intersection until it turns green, then we crank them back up and we get people to move over. Everyone clear on what rules we can break and which ones we can't? Okay. Again, guys, technically other people have the right of way. If they're proceeding through a green light and we want to go through a red light, we have to wait until that person who has that green light either stops or clears the intersection. They still have the right of way. Same with the stop signs, same with the one-way, driving down a one-way street, crossing lanes, all
And
that
more
stuff.
importantly, physics doesn't care about your right of way.
No.
All right of way is gonna do is maybe get you out of a traffic ticket later. That's
Yeah.
not gonna help you if you get into an accident now.
Escorts, guys, sometimes if you're transporting, like you have a police officer who is a patient, they will go with you. They typically will go in front of you, lights and sirens, and try to get ahead of you and clear intersections. That's typically what happens if PD is a patient. If you have a patient who's in custody of PD, they typically won't go ahead of you and preemptively clear intersections. They'll just follow behind you. If the patient is critical, that is in custody, and you're going lights and sirens back to the hospital, they'll follow suit. But don't let them distract you. You're just going to focus on your driving and let the cop figure out their own defensive driving.
Will you have an officer get in the truck with you? Or?
Depends. If the patient's critical and you've got like 3 firefighters in there helping you, typically no. But if they're working with a partner system, if like PD has a partner and then they are in custody, the patient's not critical, typically one will ride in the back with you and one will follow. But if it's just their single PD in the cop car, they just follow behind you. So yeah, guys, we always need to try to travel in the left lane. A lot of people don't understand that because what is the left lane? Fast lane, okay? We need to drive the speed limit, which is typically 5 over, right? No, drive the speed limit. Even if you're in the left lane on the highway, you get people getting pissed off at you because if you're not going 95 and you've got somebody behind you going 95, then they get mad and they pass, all right? Why do we typically stay in the left lane? Even if we're not driving lights and sirens.
We need assembly lights and sirens, people are gonna go to the right.
If I catch a call driving down 75 to a post, dispatch doesn't care where I am when they drop a call on me, right? I could be driving down the highway, catch a call, and I have to go code 1, and it's much easier to be in that left lane already than to try to move over 3 lanes so we can pass people accordingly. Guys, don't text, don't eat and drive. If your partner's driving to post, you can sit in the front of the truck and eat. That's fine if you're not physically driving. But just use your common sense if you're driving. Don't be messing with the radio. Don't be eating. Don't be texting. All that jazz. Talked about fatigue. Air evacs. Okay. We typically won't have this at Grady. Maybe if we go to the more rural areas that Grady has taken over different counties, you might see an air evac, but usually we're in such close proximity that we have hardly ever used air evacs here at Grady. There's different types of responses. There's a fixed wing, which is going to be a plane, and a rotary wing, which is going to be a helicopter. depending on your location, the terrain, the ability to make a landing, typically you're gonna see the helicopters more so than a fixed wing. These might be for scheduled long transports of patients. Maybe they got sick in Georgia and they live in California and they're going back home, but they still need medical equipment. These are gonna be for the more acute, unplanned emergencies because they're more versatile as to where they can land, have access types of things. Guys, you have to get a special certification, a special licensure to work on any type of air evac. All right, you have to get your critical care license. You can only be on there in the capacity of as a paramedic. There's no EMTs or AMTs that are utilized on air evacs. So if that wants to be, you want that to be an end goal for you, then absolutely go for it, but you gotta go through medic first and then get another certification. We typically will be the ground support. We're gonna look at the landing zone, things we need to keep in mind. Is it safe to land? What's the best place that we need to set this up? How do we approach the helicopter? All that stuff. Why do we need to call for an air evac? What are some things that might be a reason to call a bird?
Really far away from the hospital.
Transport time is the biggest one. All right, let's say we are way down in South Georgia and there are no trauma centers within X amount of hundreds of miles. And my patient is jacked up. If it's going to take an excessive amount of time for ground transport for that patient to get to an appropriate facility, I'm gonna call an air evac in. Because what would take a ground transport 2 hours takes a helicopter 30 minutes, if that.
I have a friend at AMR that canceled an air evac before he even assessed the patient. And the next day they came into a sign that said, do not cancel air unless you assess the patient yourself. They weren't happy.
What other reasons do I need an air evac?
If the terrain is okay.
Terrain's gonna be the other one, right? Can I drive my ambulance up a cliffside to go to
No.
a patient and drive it back down? No. We don't really have a lot of those issues here in Atlanta, maybe up North Georgia, maybe in some of the mountainous areas. But we don't really see the terrain issues more so in the city or the urban areas, okay? Yeah, if you've got maybe like there was a landslide or something and the roads to get out of this scene to get to the hospital are totally blocked, obviously that's a terrain issue. We would also use an air evac for that, okay?
Do you think carry blood on those?
I don't think so, but maybe.
Something my brain's telling me that I heard that somewhere, but
I don't have 110% answer for that. I mean, they probably can bring it with them, but I don't know if they like keep it stored.
Yeah.
On the helicopter.
There's not like-
Huh?
there's not like-
Yeah, so they might keep it stored at like their station.
Okay.
I don't know. But it would make sense that they would have it. All right, how do we get an air evac? Do I just have a number on my phone and be like, hey, this is paramedic Kayla, I'm on scene and I'm saying, yep, we need you guys out here ASAP?
No.
No.
Really loudly.
All right, it's not going to be your sole responsibility to make that decision. What happens?
Then the dispatcher needs them.
We're gonna call supervision, right? Typically, we won't say, hey, dispatch, can you make this call? Typically, because what's the difference between myself and dispatch?
Yours.
I'm on scene. I'm boots on the ground. I have eyes on the patient. I see things that dispatch doesn't see, right? So I'm gonna get my supervision on the radio, on the phone and say, hey, here's what we got. This patient has X going. This patient needs to go to this facility. How do you advise? Ultimately, guys, it's gonna be that supervisor's decision. But again, you're a patient advocate. If you think this patient would benefit from an air evac, then you need to try to push for it, but they're gonna be the ones that get on the phone and say, hey, Rescue Air One, we need you out here at X location, okay? Landing zone. What do we need to keep in mind for landing zones? Safety, okay, so what decisions go into that?
Accessibility, roads.
Accessibility, all right, so what area, how big do we want it to be? What's the smallest?
Like say by itself.
60 foot by 60 foot. bigger the better with this, right? Ideally, we want 100 by 100. Okay. What else do I need to think about?
Any like, see,
Okay, so yeah, if there's a significant amount of people, we'll be like, hey guys, I need you to move.
power lines, cell towers, things like that.
Overhanging wires, right? Overhanging branches. Anything, because guys, where does the helicopter come from? How are they gonna land? From above. It's not like they like, you know, kind of get down low and they like sweep through and then they land. They come directly from above. So any overhanging wires or branches or anything that would affect them from being to be able to lower down, not good. What else? Yeah, we gotta have access to the landing zone. So it can't be up like a giant hill or, you know, across from a pond or something like that. We need to be able to physically get to that area with this patient on the stretcher. What else?
I think anything in the landing zone on the ground, because helicopters make a lot of wind.
Debris.
And
If there is anything like trash or cardboard boxes or anything that can be picked up by the wind that is generated from a helicopter taking off or landing, because guys, it's intense. Has anybody ever been around one when it lands or takes off? It'll give you a real bad hair day. All right, it's a lot of velocity. I don't know if that's the right word. But we want to make sure there's not any type of debris that can be picked up and either get shoved up into the helicopter, cause mechanical problems, or cause an injury to anybody.
Oh, my dad, you know, like the roots over like the front porch, my dad stepped out there in the morning and fell off of one, because we have a new political cabinet there on Halloween, he fell on the statue. And all the specialists, he fell off the roof, according to my mother, so they were trying to land a helicopter in the cul-de-sac across the street from us.
Yeah, it's not a bad spot for it.
It's fine.
What else does this landing zone need to be?
Mark, so that they can see it.
Okay, so marked, we'll get to that in a second, but what kind of surface? Firm and flat, right? We typically don't like to have like any type of gravel be a landing zone, because what happens to the gravel? It's like freaking bullets, man. It gets intense. So firm and flat. Any type of grass, any type of just firm and flat surface is always going to be best. Asphalt, concrete. Okay, but we want to avoid very like dusty, dirty areas or gravel areas. So yeah, guys, with the landing zone, we want to mark it, right? Typically, what are some things we can use to mark it?
Tape, or not tape, cones.
Why don't we want to use cones?
It says mark with cones, I didn't agree with that.
So, we don't typically keep cones on the truck, okay? But cones are not the best thing to use to mark a landing zone. Why?
They're not super,
They're not very heavy. They themselves can get picked up.
they're also not super visible when you're that high up in the air.
So typically we want to use the vehicle on scene, right? Let's have, hey, PD, you park there. We can put our ambulance here and we can mark that kind of square area with very large visible objects. All right, especially if it is a night landing. What don't we want to use?
No lights.
No lights. You might think that you're helping the pilot by saying, hey, I'm going to park my ambulance here and I'm going to keep my lights on so you can see me from above. I'm very visible. Don't use flares. Don't have your lights on. Don't use the laser pointers. Why? They're distracting. All right, but what do they work off of at night? Night vision. If you've got an excessive source of lights, it skews their vision of where the landing zone is. No, all they're gonna see is just a big white blur. They're not gonna be able to distinguish different things and where the landing zone is. So, especially during night, guys, during the daytime as well, don't use flares, lights, or lasers. Okay, because they won't do
It
it.
says to put the cars and the lights are pointing.
Possibly, but we don't want to have the top lights on for sure. Because it could be illuminating the landing zone, but we could also skew the vision. So,
And I consider perhaps a concern with that, because once they're on the ground, you'll need illuminations to get the patient into the helicopter and things like that, so.
All right, approaching the helicopter. Guys, you can get in this tunnel vision with an air evac just as much as you can that siren syndrome. When is the only time you approach the helicopter?
Once the blades are stopped,
Mm,
if at all possible.
when you get a visual confirmation from the pilot. You either need a very clear, blatant thumbs up or, hey, come on. You make that visual, that eye contact with the pilot, and the pilot says, yeah, you're good to go. If the pilot's sitting there and he's still fiddling with controls and he is not giving you a very obvious yes sign, or he's telling you no, not yet, all right, you don't approach the helicopter. Again, it's a big wind tunnel that they create. And also, guys, what are the blades? They're very sharp, but they're also what? They're kind of a little bit flexible. So as they're slowing down, especially when they're going fast, they can literally decapitate you. Like, easy peasy. All right, but when they start to slow down, they get a little bit of movement to them. So that's why you always do, it is accurate when you see it in the movies and stuff, you approach a helicopter in a crouched fashion because they have a little bit of movement. There's a little, differential in that clearance when they're moving slower. All right. Always make sure you're approaching from the front end of the helicopter. Can I get a visual from the pilot way back here? No. I'm approaching to the nose of the helicopter because that's where the windshield is and that's where I can see the pilot and he can say, yeah, you're good. And if anything changes, right, that pilot can give me more visual cues. So always approach from the nose end of the helicopter. I think there's always approach from what, if it's at an angle, at a slight angle, we want to approach from what angle? The downward angle, right? Because that means the way that it's situated, it's going to be a bigger clearance from the rotors to the ground. All right, we don't want to approach from that uphill side because we're going to have less headspace. Okay. Typically fire will serve as like the air traffic control, right? But just these general, hey, go left, go right, forward, up, stop. Just know these general hand signs just in case you start seeing the crew, the flight crew using them with you. So, okay, low intensity headlights. Guys, it's very limited as to when you can get a helicopter to your scene. If there are certain weather conditions, they're grounded. They can't fly. If the fog density is too much, if the atmospheric temperature is too cold, there's a lot of things that go into play that keep those helicopters grounded. And hey man, I need you guys to come out here and pick this patient. Dude, sorry, we're grounded. We can't fly today. Can't help you. All right. Extremely expensive. If a patient is critical or if a patient absolutely needs this as a necessity to their care, is that a concern for me? No. But if it's questionable, a patient could probably go by grounds, but it's just going to take a really long time and I don't want to fight that traffic or I don't want to get off late. Do we need to call a bird out there? No.
You can actually buy helicopter insurance that's specifically for that. It's $50 a year.
Really?
Yep. You want to say like $100,000.
Guys, that is well worth it.
So if there's someone that believes you might get 50 one day,
$50 a year is nothing compared to an air evac bill. Bare minimum, just them arriving on scene. Not even the back transport and any care given. Roughly $30,000, $40,000.
Helicopters are expensive, and you have to have a crew full of highly trained people on
And
them.
you gotta
They're
pay
also
for the, you gotta
expensive.
pay for the gas, you gotta pay for that crew to be on call. Just them showing up and landing, regardless of if they transport you or not. $30,000-$40,000.
Depending on the insurance company, it's anywhere in the world, any air service, any person that lives in your house.
Shut the front door. I need to look into that, because that
Yeah,
is a
you know,
very
all
good
of us-
investment.
That sounds wonderful.
Google helicopter.
Yeah, and guys, a lot of insurance companies, like the medical insurance companies, they don't cover the whole cost. So if you have no insurance, or if you have really crappy insurance, it'll be a very hefty bill for you. So just keep that in mind.
And now I can sound like a rich guy and be like, oh, I have to go pay my helicopter insurance.
But insurance.
$85 a year for regular people and $65 for senior.
Hey, still $85 a year.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's still not very much.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know. I can't tell. I can't get in there to it. There's all kinds of training for help. There's all kinds of people doing that.
When there's an emergency on the ground, early activation of paramedical resources can save lives. If all criteria for dispatching an area ambulance are satisfied, Mail One helicopters will respond.
Mail One will be departing en route to Chapman. We'll be at 3,000 feet, so it's maybe about 10 minutes en route. We'll be 8 court.
And accidents and injuries often means chaos. Situations that require training, planning, speed, and skill from responders. One of those skills includes making sure that the dispatched helicopter lands safely. Besides establishing radio contact, the GPS coordinates should be provided to the pilot. While Mail One crew travels by air, preparations should be happening on the ground. For instance, there may be a pre-designated landing zone that gives the pilot a known reference. And the landing zone coordinator should be assigned to the ground crew. The landing zone coordinator is responsible for identifying a safe landing zone, one that's clear of hazards.
Then we have the fence to the east, to the north.
Such as signs, trees, power lines, and other obstacles. These features may be obvious to those on the ground, but from the air, they may not be visible to the pilot or aircrew, especially at night. Additionally, the pilot's view below the helicopter is limited, so they won't see anything directly below or behind them. For this reason, communication between the pilot and crew and the landing zone coordinator is imperative. The secure areas should measure at least 100 by 100 feet. In addition to the landing zone, the coordinator should look for obstacles 300 feet out in each direction of the anticipated approach and takeoff path. Other features of a safe landing zone include areas that are relatively flat and solid. Loose sand, dirt, and snow are stirred up by the rotors, which compromise visibility. Wind direction is an important consideration. Helicopters need to land and take off into the wind. The landing zone coordinator should stand with their back to the wind, which indicates the wind direction to the pilot. Once the zone is identified, and it's possible to do so, emergency vehicles or signal lights should be used to mark the area. Don't use cones as markers, as they're too lightweight and could become projectiles. Using emergency vehicles as markers is especially helpful at night. Mail One pilots and personnel wear night vision goggles that magnify light up to 40,000 times. For that reason, high beam headlights, spotlights, or flares should not be used during nighttime landings or takeoffs. Flashing lights can be distracting, so light bars should not be activated. A safe landing zone is only part of a good protocol with aeromedical transport. The area must be kept secure. Rotors are loud, so prior communication that assigns a tail rotor guard is essential. The rear rotor of the helicopter rotates quickly at about 2,500 RPM, so fast that the tail rotor is practically invisible and powerful enough to slice through a 3-inch tree limb. Because of the noise and turmoil at an emergency scene, the tail rotor guard's job is critical to safety. The guard stands 50 feet behind the tail and permits zero traffic from personnel or vehicles to pass through.
And have you sat back here? Have you sat back here? We got the landing zone.
Besides the usual hazards, power lines, posts, poles, and trees, Drones are becoming an increasing threat to air medical operation. As consumer sales and use of drones increases, so does the potential risk to helicopter safety. Drones are hard for a pilot to see and can be deadly if they impact the aircraft. The pilot should be immediately notified if there's a drone seen in the area. Air ambulances have an excellent record of safety, but in a worst-case scenario, those rescuers may need rescuing themselves. Here are the things responders need to know. Don't approach the aircraft until the rotor blades have completely stopped. If the crew is incapacitated and the engines are still on, they will need to be shut off for the rotors to stop. In that situation, only approach under the blades if it can be done safely. Open either of the front doors to access the cockpit. Locate the two buttons outlined in red at the top center of the main console. Push each button once and wait. The engines will stop in 15 to 20 seconds. It may take another minute for the rotor blades to come to a complete stop. Once they have, attend to the crew with patience as necessary. The handles of the emergency exits are clearly marked with orange paint. These are the first points of entry responders should try. If the rescue crews need to cut into the helicopter to free the crew, do not operate saws in these areas. The fuel lines that run vertically. The tanks underneath the helicopter. Additionally, oxygen and biohazards are typically on board, meaning that responders need to exercise care and caution in a helicopter rescue situation.
Mail 1 will be responding to me, will be rescuing land. 3 souls, we've got about 130 up the hill, will be out of below 2,000 feet.
The cooperation between ground crews and air crews during emergency maximizes the potential to save lives, something all responders have committed their lives to.
Secondary Mail 1 on roll.
All right, so guys, it's a little more intensive training if you're having to like shut down the engine and cut the crew
I
out.
didn't mention anything about killing the fuel.
Yeah.
The fuel line.
But mainly I just wanted all of that stuff to be reiterated. Guys, where are some good places for a landing zone? Because it doesn't have to be immediately on your scene, right? You can load the patient up on your stretcher, you can provide patient care, and then you can travel somewhere close by. That could be a good landing zone.
Parking lots.
Football ball fields are a really good one. Maybe a very large parking lot, like if we've got, like a Walmart or a grocery store parking lot that has excessive amount of empty spaces. Okay, big open fields. Sometimes you will see that they'll actually shut down the highway, both directions of the highway, and they can land, especially if it's like a 3 or 4 lane highway. All right, so just keep in mind all of the stipulations we need to have a good landing zone. Cul-de-sacs, as long as they have that space and nothing hanging overhead, we're good
In
to
a
go.
city setting, are routes usually an option?
Depends if they have a helipad. Yeah. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns? Everybody on Zoom good?
How often do they?
Rural settings, pretty commonly, but usually like in urban settings, it's very uncommon.
You do a lot of standbys in rural settings.
Mhm.
You go out there and stand by the aircraft, do whatever, look at check your aircraft till somebody gets on scene. And then if they don't need it, you go back inside the building. If you are needed, you'll get the call. But they do a lot of standbys. When the short time that I flew out of McCullough, we got up all hours of the night just to stand by. Turn around and go get right back to bed. A lot of rural services, right, wrong, or indifferent, that is their first, and they get reported of a car wreck within traffic. Their first initial dispatch is the ambulance, fire service, PD, and then somebody from the fire service, usually historically speaking, will put an aircraft on standby. So they ain't even left the station yet, so they're waking you up and returning. You're going out there doing all your little check-offs and then standing there waiting. And if you're not needed, you go back to bed. If you are, you start the true pre-flight to
Because it's not like an immediately, okay, let's run out, let's get in the ambulance and let's drive. There's a lot of prep work to actually get it going and get it in the air, ready to go. It takes a while, so. All right.